Hello and welcome to the Ty Brown Show. This week's episode is You're Grounded, but in a good way. It's all about identity, and very often difficult conversations are only difficult because both people are overthinking what the conversation seems to be saying about them. Have you ever been there, right? I think we have. So the goal of today's episode is to learn how to ground your identity, to absorb the blows of these attacks. So buckle up.
Podcasting from Conciliators, this is the Ty Brown Show. If you're a human and you think you might have to interact with other humans at some point, and you'd like that to go well, then listen up.
Oh, yeah.
It's time to get cozy with conflict. Let's go.
And we are back. So let's get into our stats of the week. Guess what, everybody? We broke 500. 501 listeners this week. The dispute resolution revolution marches on. I don't know if I can say really to the masses, but at least to the 500 souls out there who are unfortunate enough to be spending their day, at least the next few minutes, listening to me rant on about resolving disputes. But regardless, I'm really grateful you're listening, and I'm grateful that you're sharing this and inviting others to listen. I hope you'll continue to do that. For those who might be listening for the first time, the goal of this podcast is really to just resolve disputes in your life. I'm a practitioner of alternative dispute resolution, a mediator, and I work, I actually own a company called Conciliators that helps businesses and their workforces get along. My first grader, when people ask her, what her daddy does for work, she tells them that he's a professional peacemaker with relationships, not just for the people who are stuck in lawsuits, but for everybody, because we're all stuck here on Earth trying to work things out and talk to each other. And boy, let me say this. Here's a little rant just to get the show going. What has happened to human interactions, right? Holy cow, they are getting bad. They are getting really bad. Yeah, really, really bad. No, so, but really, I don't know when this all changed. It seemed like when I was growing up that there was a certain level of like civility, or I don't even know if civility is the right word, but people just talk to each other better back when, way back when, when I was a boy. No, but here, for example, okay, so I was at BYU, Brigham Young University, doing some CLE, continuing legal education for, because I'm on my, I think I have to report so many hours of CLE in every field, and it's very, very well attended. Lots of people come down, and it's just a hoot, right? Very, very good presenters, and so anyway, I'm there doing my CLE. I stop for some lunch, and I'm sitting there, and kind of like it's the Wilk, right? If you've been to BYU, you've probably been to the Wilk, and they have this place called the Cougar Eat. That's my wife used to work there when we were college freshmen, so very nostalgic. It's almost romantic in many ways. So anyway, there I am in the Cougar Eat. I'm getting like this awesome rice bowl, and there's this young woman, probably 18 years old, working the register, and there are a lot of people there waiting in line. Everyone's hungry, and maybe that's why everyone was so grumpy. Maybe we were all just hungry. I don't know. But to put on your food, and this guy who's not been waiting in line, he just comes walking up to where I'm standing, and he grabs basically the whole stack of bags, and there were plenty of bags there. I don't know how many he grabbed, but he left like one or two. And he barks at this young woman who's working at this little restaurant. He's like, "Hey, you're just about out of bags," and he said it with this tone of aggression and like almost, it was very accusatory, and it shocked her, like it surprised her a lot, and she stopped and she looked and she didn't know what to say, and there was kind of this awkward little silence, and as you can probably tell by how much I talk here, I don't love the awkward silence. And so I jokingly say, well, yeah, thanks to him, you're almost out of bags, just trying to make light of it. And also kind of trying to, get in a little jab at this guy who's attacking this poor young worker. And he looks at me like all angry like. And I just smiled, try to kind of disarm him with us. Even ordered food. He has no food. So he has no need for using the sauces that are there. But he then follows this up with this kind of statement. She brings the bags and he says, by the way, how the insert expletive am I supposed to know what kind of sauce this is? And I think everyone who was sitting there or who was standing there was just kind of shocked. At least they should have been. Probably everyone was so used to this kind of behavior that it wasn't shocking. But I was shocked. And this girl now, she's like big eyes, like verge of tears. And so now I'm kind of mad. And so I look at him and I was like, well, to answer your question, one way might be saying something like this. Excuse me, miss. Can you help me? What kind of sauce is this? And I actually said this, really my goal at this point was to embarrass him. And I hope it worked, frankly, because that is unacceptable to go around with that kind of aggression in our daily dialogues. My goodness. And so not 30 seconds later, there's a woman who gets her food, and I'm still, I don't even know what I was doing, but I was standing over there still, and she was like, hey, you forgot my spoon. and she just yells this, like, all like, hey, like, what? Oh my gosh, what an offense. Can you believe that someone wouldn't put a spoon in there? And so I tapped her shoulder and I was like, oh, hey, the spoons are right behind you. You get those yourself. Boy, anyway, I walked away from that little line experience thinking the world needs to change. People need to stop. They just need to cut it out. Stop the contempt. Boy. Anyway, so next time you're feeling all worked up and huffy, just remember that poor worker at the Cougar Eat. There are easier ways to communicate what you're thinking than getting mad at people and viewing them with contempt. All right. How's that for like a 5-minute random rant? Okay. That's not what the show is about today. Did I even share the stats? 501. That's our stats. I think I did. Yeah, and by the way, I'm only like a one-take guy, so if it gets chippy and I get lost on this, I'm sorry. They get something they don't want. All right, so as a reminder, last week's episode was, we should rename it. We should rename it the Harry Potter debacle. I based the entire episode off of inaccurate Harry Potter knowledge, which is embarrassing. And I think I probably received maybe 12 different texts or Facebook messages or emails about the funny use of Wingardium Leviosa. Turns out Wingardium Leviosa is not the disarming spell. Last week we talked about disarming, right? How to basically win arguments by disarming people. And it's not about winning, right? It's about resolving things. So anyway, that Wingardium Leviosa, turns out that's just to make stuff levitate. It's not about disarming. I thought about coming on here today trying to defend my use of the wrong Harry Potter spell, but the truth is I just, I blew it. I blew it on the Harry Potter front. So shout out to all you Harry Potter aficionados who know so much. I am impressed, and actually it was really funny. Every time someone brought it up to me, I couldn't help but laugh. But I also, I don't know if you saw, but on the Ty Brown Show Facebook page, I awarded 5 million points to the first person who could give me the right spell. And there's probably some debate about who should win this, because Alex Eliason said the killing spell would technically disarm someone. I can't remember what that is. I think I don't know. I'm not going to try that. Not going down that road again, right? I'll get called out. But actually, the person who won, Kristen Taylor, congratulations, 5 million points to you. The correct disarming spell is Expelliarmus. So Way to go. And actually, I don't even think you should get those points, Kristen. It should probably be your 10-year-old. So anyway, that's that. Just as a reminder, the actual disarming technique, as far as, difficult conversations goes like this. First, you agree with them. You say something like, you know what, you're right. Second, you find the truth in what they're saying, even if what they're saying is very hurtful, and if it seems like a stretch, you can find some grain of truth in what they're saying and point it out. It shows that you are listening, that you understand. All right. So first is agree. Second, find the truth. Third is empathize with them. Let them feel how they feel and acknowledge it. And don't try to control how they feel. You empathize with them. You go there with them. And then you're primed and ready to have a future focused discussion on solutions. So you've got a captive audience and things will go well if you can do those steps. Agree, find the truth, empathize, future focused discussion. If you've used this technique, I'd love to hear your story and share it. Like I said, this is like the most powerful technique I know. So use it and then tell me your experience with it. It takes a lot of practice. It's not easy. In fact, it's easy to mess up, but it's incredibly powerful. So if you've used it, let me know. Send me a message on our Facebook page or email us at stories@thetybrownShow.com. And if you haven't used it, oh, come on, what more could I say? I mean, that's on you if you haven't used it yet. Find some people to agree with and watch what happens. Okay. So this week's episode is about grounding your identity. And let me just tell you, this is another powerful one. If you're the kind of person who gets worked up, if you've got like a temper, or if you're the kind of person who feels insecure from time to time, this will change your life. This will change your life. There's so much power here. So to get you thinking about identity, I want you to just envision this kind of a circumstance. I want you to envision that you're this kind of person. You were raised to believe that hard work is very important and that you are a hard worker, right? You're always worth more than you're getting paid. You're diligent. You're loyal, right? You are competent, and that is how you were raised to believe. Let's just, if you weren't raised that way, I'm sorry. Just pretend like you were for purposes of this exercise. All right. So that's really important to you. I work hard. I'm worth more than I'm getting paid. That's how I do things. That's how I operate. So you start, you've been at the same company for a number of years and you've had mostly good feedback, and you've even turned down some opportunities to go elsewhere. And so you're thinking, maybe I ought to bring up the subject of salary with my boss. You kind of agonize over this because it's not really, it's not really you to be out there saying like, hey, pay me more, right? Because you're the kind of person who's always worth more than you're getting paid. But you get some encouragement and you're kind of spurred on by your colleagues, and you decide you're going to ask your boss for a raise. So you go in and your boss responds by saying, I'm actually surprised you want to talk about this at all, because recently I have felt your performance has not been good. Whoa, curveball, right? Weren't expecting that. Remember, this is how you live your life. You're always worth more than you're getting paid. You always do your part. You work hard. And now to hear this, it's like, boy, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? Well, my guess is probably one of two ways. Either A, you're now extrapolating this statement from your boss to implicate your entire identity, and you're starting to wonder if you actually are that kind of person that you think you are. You start wondering, am I actually the kind of person who works hard and is worth more than they're getting paid? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I've been getting lazy. And now you start to exaggerate this negative feedback. Or alternatively, maybe you're a denier. Maybe you're in denial about this and you say something like, my boss, he doesn't know anything. He does not even understand what I do for a job. He knows business, but he doesn't know XYZ, which is what I do. So yeah, he can't understand my contribution because he's just a doofus, right? So now you're getting defensive. You're in denial, right? Those are like the most common responses to an identity implication. And like I say, conversations, they get chippy when it seems like the conversation might be saying something about you. So anyway, our goal today is to go through these kinds of crises and then to figure out how to keep our balance or regain our balance. All right, so a couple of things about identity. Difficult conversations are difficult because, in most instances, they threaten our identity, or because we're worried we need to say something that threatens somebody else's identity. So that's what makes them hard in the first place. We go into this conversation thinking we are a certain person, and then that person, thinking we are a certain way, but then the way we see ourselves, it's called into question by the conversation. It throws us way off balance. It causes us to doubt our position, it causes us to doubt ourselves, our even our observations we can start to doubt. Oh, it's just so funny. I mean, these identity crises, they really throw us off. And it's probably because the idea of ourselves and our future, that is hardwired to our adrenal response. It makes what is already a difficult exercise, having a sensitive conversation, it makes that almost impossible. It's like playing Jenga in the middle of a seizure. Like it's really, really hard. Another good comparison. So I occasionally exercise, like once a month, whether I need it or not. And I'll be lifting weights, and I have cubital tunnel syndrome real bad in both elbows. It causes my hands to go numb if my elbows hit a certain angle. And so there are times where I'll be holding weights and all of a sudden my hands will go numb. And sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I'm just going to push through and finish this set. Well, you can imagine how well that goes over. Like, not at all. But it's kind of like trying to have a difficult conversation when your identity gets challenged. It's like your hands go numb and you can no longer control this weight. And that's what happens, right? That is the physiological response of our identities being challenged. And I'm sure you felt it. So how can we be a little less vulnerable to these kinds of identity earthquakes or identity attacks? Well, the answer is finding a little bit of security. Don't you admire the people like who they're like the mallard duck? Everything just rolls right off their back. They're just not fluffed by anything. Those people have a really secure identity. And so I'm going to give you some tips on how to have a secure identity. And like I say, this will change your life if you let it. I know it's really helped me a lot learning these principles. And in this next segment, a lot of this comes from, it's well documented in a lot of literature. Virtually every kind of peace building or dispute resolution text, reconciliation, research, all of these things talk about the following points about identity. So okay. Step one is to avoid all or nothing thinking. That's avoiding denial, avoiding exaggeration. When we get one piece of feedback, we can't let that piece of feedback define who we are. We can't forget everything else about us. It's inaccurate to do so, but it happens all the time. So exaggeration is this, and you need to avoid exaggeration. It's this thinking that, if I'm not completely competent, then I must be totally incompetent. It's tempting to go there, even though it sounds bizarre. It sounds like, why would anyone do this? Well, I don't know why, but we do. But we act as though this negative feedback's the only information we have about ourselves. So here's the story. I was working with an employee at an organization who worked with, did a lot of transactions. This person did a lot of transactions. And they messed up on a transaction, and their boss came down on them pretty hard for it. This person was really upset, not at their boss, but they were really upset at themselves for making this error. And they were so upset at themselves that they had concluded that they must not be a good worker and that they should look elsewhere. I'm done. I'm throwing in the towel because this terrible experience of the boss coming down on them and feeling like they're incompetent. And I remember talking to this person. They were so worked up, and I was really trying to empathize with them. Eventually, I asked them, how many transactions have you done perfectly? And I just remember this person saying, well, does that really matter? And I responded, yeah, it does matter. And then I told them, I said, look, this one transaction is one piece of information. Are you going to just ignore all the other? And they had that decision to make. Like, oh, yeah, am I going to tell myself the story that I really am just bad that I'm no good at this job because I made a mistake. And they decided that they were not going to buy that story after all. And they decided, you know what? I am pretty good. And this was an error. I dropped the ball. I messed up. But 9,999 times I do this just right. So anyway, that was, and then they felt better about their job, and they felt better about the criticism that they received. They realized that the criticism was not, hey, Mr. Smith, you're a terrible employee. Why do we ever hire you? You've got no skill. You're incompetent. You don't know what you're doing. You're not careful. That wasn't what the boss was saying. All the boss was saying was, hey, this was an error, and you need to fix that. How can we, is there anything that can be done to make sure we're still improving and limiting those errors more and more every day? So anyway, it was eye-opening for this person to realize that the feedback they were getting was actually different than they thought. The feedback they were getting was limited to a certain specific instance. It was not a blanket statement about their competence, even though it felt that way initially. Okay, so that's exaggeration. The other thing we need to avoid is denial. This is when your image is perfect. You decide, you know what, my image is one of perfection. I have no room for mistakes. I have no room for any error. And anytime someone suggests that I may have made a mistake, that creates a real problem for me because my identity is such that it can't be true. And so anytime you get this kind of feedback, you start thinking to yourself, look, I need to figure out why this isn't true. I need to figure out why it doesn't matter, or maybe just why it wasn't actually a mistake, right? That's where you start going. Go back to the person who asked their boss for a raise a minute ago. The boss said, I've been disappointed, right? Denial requires this person to get real defensive and say in their head, yeah, the boss doesn't know anything about what I've done. If the boss actually knew what I've done, he would have never said that. Yeah, that's denial. Okay. Requires a lot of mental gymnastics. And let me tell you this, denial is more dangerous than exaggeration because the longer you deny, the longer you hold on to an unrealistic image of identity perfection, the bigger the gap gets between the way you see yourself and kind of what you fear might actually be true about yourself. And the bigger that gap gets, the more you have to lose by giving up this facade. And so if you are prone to denial, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. You have to start by, well, and that brings us to the solution. What do you do? Even if you're a denier or an exaggerator, what do you do? Well, you just take an accurate inventory of who you are. It's like the person who did the transactions. They had to realize, well, the accurate view is I'm almost always perfect at this, but I am capable of error. And if I'm not cautious, I can make a mistake. So a couple of stories about having an accurate self-image. The cool thing about this, by the way, about having an accurate self-image is even if in the midst of your conversation you start out feeling like really defensive and denying, or you want to exaggerate it and you're getting all sorry for yourself, you can quickly rebound. This technique allows for some time and some error. So even if you mess up at first, you can quickly adjust and get out of it just fine. Probably the nicest person on earth that I can think of. Well, maybe second nicest. I don't know, probably first actually. So anyway, Whitney gives me a call, a stinky diaper that you guys had left up there. And I just wanted you to know that had happened so that you could, just as a kind of a learning experience, so you can remember next time you go up to be real careful. We have these kind of cleaning checklists and just go through them, double check. And she said this like very, very articulately, very well. It was not aggressive or anything. Very tactful, very tactfully done, which is her MO. She's an expert at doing this. The funny thing was the effect it had on me is I started, at least initially, I slipped up by I started thinking this. I went into exaggeration and I started thinking, you know what? I am the least responsible kid in my family. of all the kids in my family, of all my siblings, it would be me that leaves the diaper up there and stinks up the whole cabin. Yeah, that would be me. And I started kind of weaving in my head this kind of so pitiful story of myself about how I'm just a little bit less on the ball than everyone else in my family. And I realized this was happening and immediately decided, I'm going to do a course correction. We're not going there. And I took kind of an accurate inventory, which is, I am responsible. Like I know how to clean up. I know how to take care of things. And I started thinking back, and I thought, I know why I forgot. We were getting the kids in the car, and someone was screaming, and the blah, blah, blah. We had, we've got these 4 little tornadoes tearing through the cabin. We're trying to keep it clean. And as we were doing all of our pickup chores, we just got our wires crossed on who was doing what, and it got missed. And so as soon as I took this accurate inventory, and I realized that we actually do a pretty good job cleaning up the cabin, and in this one instance we got our wires crossed and we made a mistake. We left this undone. As soon as I did that, boy did I feel better. I stopped feeling so bad about everything, and I was just like, oh yeah, okay. And then the next time I went up, I was able to, that wasn't such a negative experience. I was able to just be thinking like, oh yeah, and we need to be doubly sure that that my family, that we've talked about who's doing what, because otherwise we could miss a job. But anyway, that's a good example of, you start going down the path of exaggeration of a negative feedback, and then you catch it and you fix it, and it's not so bad. I had the opposite experience this morning where I instead of exaggeration, I started going into denial. This morning, on my way into work to do this podcast, I got pulled over for speeding in a school zone, 5 miles an hour over the limit. And the thing that's crazy is I had just dropped my kid off at this school, just like a block away, so she could walk over with a friend. I knew the school was there. I knew there was a school zone. And I was just kind of going with the flow of traffic, and I went through 5 miles an hour fast, and got pulled over. And I actually think I was going a little more than 5 miles an hour fast. I just wasn't paying close enough attention to my speed. But anyway, the cop cited me for 5 over, and I was mad. And at first I was like in denial. I was like, oh, come on. Like this is ridiculous. I was going with the flow of traffic, and I was trying to weave a story where, I am a perfectly good driver. I don't make any errors, and if you're trying to insinuate that I don't care about these children's lives, like the cop came and asked me, he goes, "Hey, did you see those flashing lights?" As soon as he asked that, it felt like he was saying like, yeah, you don't care that there are little kids crossing the road. You don't care about killing people. Like I started kind of, there are these implications. Like, what are you saying about me here? And anyway, my response was a denial response initially. And fortunately, I didn't say any of that out loud. But internally, I started feeling like this denial, like, no. And who cites someone for this amount over the speed limit? But ultimately, I was able to kind of regain my balance, and say, "Gosh, what was I thinking? Why was I not being more cautious about my speed there?" I try to be very cautious about my speed, especially in school zones, and I was able to feel a little bit better about it. Instead of being so angry about this ticket and worked up all day, I just accepted. You know what? Blew it on this one, and. But I'm still a good driver. I'm going to be a little more cautious, particularly dropping the kids off at school. Anyway, that's just another example. All right. So, wanted to introduce you to a concept called the concern alert. The concern alert comes from Brian Coots. He's my law partner, and his wife. I don't know which one of them. It may have been Linda that made this up. But they're both really good communicators, really deliberate about managing strong relationships, particularly in their marriage. And so my ears always perk up whenever I hear things from them, because they're a really good example of this stuff. The concern alert is a code. It's a code that Brian and Linda developed to help each other not get knocked off balance if they're about to say something that they perceive could throw the other person's identity into this little identity quake situation. In marriage, you're partnered together with a spouse. You're trying to work through problems that you encounter. You're trying to help each other improve. You're trying to be a good spouse. There is a temptation that every time you say something about your spouse, if you receive any kind of feedback that feels negative, it is really easy in a marriage to start saying to yourself, what they're really saying is that I'm a bad spouse, that I'm selfish, or blah 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 blah. So anyway, Brian and Linda address this issue by creating the code concern alert. So if there's something that's sensitive that needs to be talked about, they lead with, "Hey, I have a concern alert," and it's almost a joke. Like it's almost a little bit funny. It's not like so serious. It's not like, "Hey, honey, we need to talk," right? That's like, let's just start the conversation on the wrong foot here, right? No, it's not like that. Concern alert, it's almost like a funny thing, but it's code for saying, "Hey, look, I'm about to say something, and you might take it personally, but you need to know it's not meant to be a personal attack. I love you. We're in this together. We're going to solve this. We're about to solve a problem together, all right? And you might feel self-conscious about it, but don't. It's just a concern alert." And so anyway, that's concern alert. I love it. It's a team approach to addressing important issues without throwing someone you care about into this, off balance, uneasy, adrenal response state. So anyway, that's a great tip, and I'd recommend using that, particularly in a marriage. So another little tip that I've learned from watching divorcing couples in mediation is to not try so hard to control the other person's reaction. It's good to be careful about the way you say things, and it's good to say them in a way that's clear and understandable and accurate. And it's good to be sensitive to others' feelings when you say things, to take that into account. But as soon as you cross the line and you start creating an expectation where when you're delivering the news, you are implying that you expect them to take it a certain way, that you want them to. As soon as you cross that line, you've lost. You've lost the battle. So here's an example. Divorcing couple, they've got kids. They decide, what, we're separating, but we're going to make it really good on the kids. We're going to be very cognizant of their needs and their emotions. And so we're going to sit them down and we're going to tell them, it's going to be okay. And we're going to be both in your life, and we're going to be very happy, and you're still going to get to spend lots of time with everybody, and you're going to have all of your needs met, and we're going to do vacations and blah, 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 blah. We have a good plan in place. This is all going to work. So you can say all these things, and the harder you try to make it seem like everything's okay, the more it looks like you're creating the expectation that the child's not allowed to be sad. The child's not allowed to be hurt. And if you've done that, then you've lost. You have cut off the relationship with your child because they're not allowed to feel the way they do around you anymore. And so whenever I talk to couples as a mediator, I would tell them, tell the kids that you're being as careful as you can to make sure their lives are as good as possible going forward, but tell them that they are allowed to be angry, or they're allowed to be upset about this, and that it's not really good news. Don't couch it as good news, because it's not. It's not. But tell them that you're really committed to helping them any way you can. That's what matters. So anyway, one of the benefits of not trying to control the reaction you get so much is it's very liberating for you. It makes communication a lot easier, because instead of trying to control their reaction, which really you shouldn't have control over, instead of that, you just try to focus on how to control your response to their reaction. You can anticipate what their reaction will be, and you can prepare yourself to respond in a way that makes sense, in a way that's good for the relationship. So that's my advice. Stop worrying so much about the reaction you're going to get. And, well, I wouldn't say stop worrying about it. Just don't control it. Don't control the reaction that you're going to get. It will improve your relationships. Okay, now going back to Stop hitting yourself. This is our segment, listener story. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to fly through this because we are at 35 minutes, folks. Okay, really quick. I've changed the facts of this a lot, and by the way, I'll change all kinds of details so that it's not identifiable. This came from a younger listener. And actually, I think our following is actually a fairly young one. Facebook kind of tracks people who are liking the page and stuff. And our younger people following is probably our biggest demographic, to my surprise. But it makes sense because teenagers and, young marrieds and others, they're in a lot of difficult conversations all the time. So anyway, here's the quick story. We're going to make this super quick. Somebody was getting rumors spread about them. They were untrue, and they were very hurtful. And the relationship was under a ton of stress. So the person says, hey, what can I do to try to get this back on the rails? It's a relationship I value, but this person just straight up lied. And they're lying, they're disparaging my name to others. Oh, that's a tough spot to be in. And so the question is, how do you have this conversation? How do you get it back on the rails? And the goal here is not simply dispute resolution. Dispute resolution is like, hey, we're going to solve one problem. The goal here was deeper. The goal here was actually reconciliation. I want to solve this one problem, this one misunderstanding, and I want to have a relationship going forward. So that's a bigger thing. This is the kind of dispute that requires ongoing relationship afterwards. So my analysis of this was pretty straightforward. Step one is get up the courage to have the conversation. I just encourage this person that, hey, you know what? It's okay. It's a conversation that needs to be had, and don't be too afraid. Make sure that you realize where this other person's coming from. Yeah, they just disparaged you. Yeah, they spread rumors about you that were untrue. But where's that coming from? Why did they do that in the first place? Well, the answer, this person was really hurt. Well, did you hurt them? Well, no, I didn't hurt them. I was totally honest with them, and I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know why they started spreading rumors. Didn't make any sense to me. And then I started asking them about their relationship generally, and learned that, there had been some other things that had gone on in the relationship that could have caused the person who spreaded rumors to start feeling like the relationship was suffering a little bit, and that really there may have been even a perception that they had been betrayed, and that's why they lashed out and started spreading rumors. The betrayal was not a real one, by the way. It didn't make sense to this. It didn't make sense to me even. But we kind of figured out where this all came from. And so the advice as we talked through it was to come in and start the conversation by explaining, hey, when I saw this, this social media attack, or, when so-and-so told me about what you had said about me and spreading these rumors, like I felt so hurt, and I was really angry. But, and then here comes the disarming part. But I started realizing that maybe what you were saying is that you felt like I didn't have your back, and that I was being a little bit selfish. And if I'm honest with myself, I'd have to say you're right. I hadn't been as loyal. I hadn't been there for you, and it must have hurt a lot. But I would very much like to, and then you spell out kind of what you'd like to see happen. So there you go. You've agreed. You found the truth in what they're saying. You've given them some empathy, and now you're focusing on kind of how things look going forward. And as you're talking about how things look going forward, you can now spring up. But by the way, what you did, saying this, spreading these rumors, it really hurt me, and I'm worried that others might believe those things. And that could really damage my reputation. And you don't have to say all that. You can just leave it at, that really hurt. And I wonder if there's a way for us to fix it. And then you're kind of brainstorming together and probably going to get an apology. And now you're doing better. You're doing better. You can talk about in the future, look, let's just come to each other. Let's talk about these things privately. and we're good. We're moving on. And so now you've kind of laid the framework for the reconciliation. This is how it will work going forward. Our relationship is one we both expect will continue. The expectations are managed, but at the same time, you've done what is, virtually almost impossible to do without a really deliberate approach, which is empathized with someone who has completely unreasonably attacked you. But that's how you unlock the key to resolution and reconciliation. So, hope you enjoyed the episode today. I would just give you this invitation to be a little happier. You'll find a lot of power in grounding your identity, accepting the reality that we are who we are. Sometimes our intentions are complex. Sometimes we make mistakes, but that is not the only information you have, right? Get an accurate picture of yourself, and it will be incredibly empowering for you. And also, if you're at the Cougar, don't yell at the poor people, the poor lady who's working the cashier, the cash register. All right, have a little more love in what you say. Drop the contempt. All right. Thanks again for listening to the show. I hope you'll subscribe, share this with people you know, and we'll continue the dispute resolution revolution. Until next time, this is Ty Brown. Thanks for listening.